It's Friday, December the 20th. From The Economist in London, this is The Week Ahead, a look at some of the stories that will be in the headlines next week. I'm Daniel Franklin, Executive Editor at The Economist.
And I'm Tom Standage, the Digital Editor. In The Week Ahead, the Federal Reserve celebrates its 100th birthday. The crossword puzzle also celebrates its centenary. A well-known chain of tie retailers shuts down, and it's the winter solstice. Daniel, let's start with the Federal Reserve's 100th birthday. This is presumably something that central bankers around the world have been looking forward to.
Well, yes, it's a huge event for the central banking fraternity. The first two efforts to create a central bank in America flopped and ended in failure. But this one succeeded rather spectacularly, in fact, probably more so than its founders ever dreamed of. There was controversy right from the start about how the Federal Reserve should operate. Conservatives and bankers themselves wanted the banks to run it, but progressive Democrats insisted that Washington have a big say to protect Main Street and farmers. And the result on December 23rd, 1913 was a compromise. Since then, the Fed has tended to accumulate powers and of late, thanks to the financial crisis, it's been particularly active on many fronts as lender of last resort, as a big intervener in the form of pumping in liquidity to the economy, and also in regulation. And I think that's perhaps above all an area where it's facing a big backlash, that the Fed is too invasive, too intrusive. And on the monetary policy front, the incoming head of the Fed, Janet Yellen, is going to face a very tricky business of unwinding all the Fed's activism of recent times without undoing the economic recovery.
Well, the Fed's 100th birthday comes 2 days after another 100th birthday, that of the crossword puzzle. The first crossword puzzle in its sort of modern incarnation appeared in the New York World newspaper on December the 21st, 1913, as part of it was a Sunday, so it was part of a Sunday supplement called Fun. And in fact, one of the clues, the answers, was filled in, the word fun. And it looks sort of familiar to modern crossword solvers, but not entirely. It doesn't have any black squares filled in. It's a diamond shape. And the way that the numbering system worked was different. So instead of 2 across, for example, it had 2-3 because you had to connect the numbers 2 and 3 with the answer to a particular clue. It was also a definitional crossword, so it didn't have cryptic clues. Those actually came later. So the first crossword appeared, and it was created by a chap called Arthur Wynne. It was quite popular, so he did it again the following week. It was actually called a word cross initially, and apparently because of a typographical error, it was renamed crossword shortly afterwards. And it then started to become hugely popular in the 1920s. And one of the things I find particularly amusing about this is that there were actually arguments about the medical impact of crosswords. Were they, as some people suggested, very good at sort of calming you down and making you sort of get ready for the day and think in a measured way about things? Or were they in fact dangerous? And that if you were a person of a nervous disposition, they could tip you over the edge because you'd be so frustrated that you wouldn't be able to work out one of the answers. And so I think it's quite amusing when we have the similar debates today about video games, and they've also arisen about comic books and other new forms of entertainment media, that actually even the crossword triggered this kind of moral panic. But they went on to become hugely popular, and they have some quite interesting cultural variations. In Britain and in Commonwealth countries, we're generally keener on cryptic crosswords rather than the straightforward definitional ones. And crosswords in different countries have different sort of styles of grids, different conventions, and so on. So it all looked absolutely like a fad when it first appeared, but some fads stick around, and the crossword is a very good example of that.
Well, let's move from something that has endured for a long time to something that hasn't. Tie Rack, a well-known firm of retailers of ties and other accessories, is closing its doors just after Christmas. And I think this is emblematic of the way that business fashion in particular has changed for men in recent years.
Yes, I should point out, for the benefit of people listening to this rather than watching video, that neither of us is wearing a tie. So is this just the triumph of the sort of Silicon Valley smart casual look? Will we all be wearing hoodies in 10 years' time?
Well, it is true that a few years ago, the American Association that represented American makers of ties shut down after its membership shrunk from 120 to 25. So something quite deep here is going on, and that was partly to do with manufacturing moving outside America. But fashion clearly changed with the rise of Silicon Valley. But perhaps that's also a temporary phenomenon. Recently, at a big awards ceremony in Silicon Valley, even Mark Zuckerberg turned up in his tuxedo.
Yes, but I should say that flying the flag for Silicon Valley casual wear was Sergey Brin of Google, who attended the same award ceremony wearing a sweatshirt and a backpack. So perhaps that's where this is all going.
Finally, Tom, one thing that we can predict with absolute certainty is the winter solstice. Is there anything that we can expect different this time round?
Well, it's the shortest day of the year in the northern hemisphere. It's of course the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere, and this is a day that we don't really pay much attention to in the modern world, but used to be hugely significant in the going back as far as the Neolithic period, when people were agriculturalists and they were very concerned that the days were getting shorter and shorter, and maybe they would just, the sun would never come back at all, and that would be it. So the winter solstice marks the day where the day is the shortest, and after that the days start to get longer again. So there is hope that winter will come to an end. This is why we have all these festivals of rebirth. Christmas is plonked on top of them all, the earlier festivals, because the symbolism fits very nicely, but also it was a way for the early church to squelch the pagan ceremonies that were taking place in midwinter. I think there's going to be more attention to it paid this year than usual, simply because Stonehenge, which is one of the places where the winter solstice is marked, you can actually get free entrance to Stonehenge, and you're even allowed to go inside the stones, which is quite unusual on the days of the summer and winter solstice. This is becoming more popular over the years. 5,000 people attended it last year, but they're expecting record attendance this year because a new visitor centre has just opened this week at Stonehenge, and so it's been in all the papers, and this fact that you're going to be able to go and observe this, and pagans and druids and astronomy buffs like to go and do this, means I think that we're going to be hearing a bit more about the winter solstice than we used to. But I think what's interesting about it is that it's been completely overlaid by all of these other festivals, but it was hugely significant thousands of years ago in a way that is very easy for us to overlook now.
Well, that's the end of this year's cycle of The Week Ahead. Do join us next week for the first of a two-part special edition looking at the year ahead. From London, this is The Economist.